Okay. All right. So congratulations, you found this uh session, and I'm so glad we're all here. Okay. So basically, going forward with 4 semesters of music theory under our belts, I've always uh I frequently get the comment that, oh, this all feels overwhelming. I'm not sure if I can remember all of this stuff. Can you guys see this document that I'm projecting?
Yes.
Okay, good. Um, one of the things that I consider when teaching this class and how things progress going forward is it's constantly moving and constantly reviewing. So, for example, when we were introduced how to read different clefs, right? Okay, we learned approaches to figuring out clefs. Most of the clefs, the treble clef, the bass clef, these are familiar clefs, right? And then we learned the C clefs, and we had to learn kind of a little trick to figure out, okay, well, where's middle C? And then I can kind of work from there um, to find other notes. All right. And then as we get to music theory 3, all of a sudden we have voice leading and a lot of information about harmony under our belts. And so when it comes to placement tests, usually what happens is they test at the music theory 3 level first. And then if they find deficiencies, then they'll either recommend a refresher course or they can kick you back, to music theory 2, um, which is really hard for some to experience that. Um, so, what are they looking for? What they're trying to understand and assess is, does the candidate comprehend basic fundamental theory? And by that I mean intervals, triads, and harmony, basic voice leading, and analysis of harmony, as well as basic forms. And by basic forms, I mean binary and ternary form. Okay, so we're going to talk about uh, some strategies for preparing for a test like this. And for some of us, uh, this might be a mental exercise, and for others, it might be a practice exercise. So we'll do a little bit of both. So I'm going to come up with a question. Um, and then we'll go at how that question might look on a test. All right. Any, okay, you guys can see my board now, right? Okay,
Yes.
cool. I just did this whole OER thing this semester, and
What's OER?
online electronic resource.
Oh,
And what we're trying to do is get rid of textbooks.
oh, that's scary.
Uh-huh. But
Why?
sometimes scary is good.
Who wants to spend more time on a screen? Not
My
I.
school has a program where you only pay $30 per book, and you get a textbook, which is really crazy for a university. Only $30 a textbook, but they're all online.
Yeah.
Okay,
That,
so
that was a really expensive textbook.
sure. But think about it this way. What if I was given a year to rewrite the Benward textbook in a way that I think is a little bit more approachable? So that's the spirit of this, is giving more control, giving less control to the publisher and more control to the instructor, because the publisher is not necessarily uh the person that you want. The team of people that write these books don't necessarily think about how they're being used. It's a lot like Finale back in the day. It was written by coders and not by musicians. And so for 10 years it sucked. And then once the musicians got a hold of it, then it improved dramatically. And we can debate that. Okay, so here's one of the problems that likely you will be faced. We'll get a clef, and then there'll be something like this: G major and a Roman numeral 6. How would we attack that problem? Well, yeah, okay, we're already starting to count. That's exactly how we attack this problem. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're thinking diatonic, right? There's that word, diatonic, where we're thinking alphabet. Diatonic is just another word for alphabet. But the alphabet applies to the scale. And if you don't know your scale and your key signature, then solving this is going to be a little tricky. Now, if the clef has no key signature, okay, one strategy for that would be put the key signature down if you know it. Okay, that shows that you have another level of comprehension, that we're thinking diatonic, which means key signature. And then, like Kylie was doing, I'm just cycling through the scale: G, A, B, C, D, right up to E. And I might even go another step further and go, hey, wait a second, this is E minor. Okay, I know that. So diatonic triads will be tested. The reverse engineering of that will be a key signature. Okay, and then they'll give you the chord. And then they'll say, okay, they're trying to test, do you understand what the key signature is? And then the position of the root of that chord within that key. All right. So a key signature could be major or it could be minor. It's not going to be modal, but major key. Let's just assume it's a major key. If it's a major key, we know, okay, A flat major. So I'm going to write down my answer. This is the key of A flat. I'm understanding it that way. And then we find the root, and then we get into the world of diatonic. Okay, so we start with A flat and we cycle through and we determine that this is a $5 footlong. It's a dominant. Okay. All right. So this is a place where they I feel like I just blinded myself. I'm gonna use a hat. Um, this is kind of a fundamental place where they start with diatonic triads, testing key signatures and scales at the same time. Pedagogically, autagogically, that's a word I learned on Wednesday, which means adult pedagogy. Anyhow, they can test key signatures and scales at the same time. All right. I have a feeling you guys will do pretty well at that. Any questions so far? Okay, then we're gonna move on. The next problem will be dominant seventh chords. Now, remember that when it comes to the chapter on seventh chords in the Benward textbook, they had 3 types of resolutions. 3 types. Type 1, I think he calls it type A, but type 1, circle progression with resolution. Type 2, non-circle progression with resolution. And type 3, no resolution. Sometimes that question appears on a diagnostic exam. What are the 3 types? So be sure to remember, and it's fairly logical, if we can connect resolution with the circle, okay? So it's either the chord progression is going to follow the circle of fourths, or it's not going to follow the circle of fourths, or with type 3, there's no resolution, which usually means that the 7th of a dominant chord is a common tone. I'm going to go to type 1 first, because that is probably what you're going to be tested on. So frequently, we'll see something that looks like this. Okay, the key is F. And then we'll have a lovely dominant 7th chord like this. Right? Okay, dominant 7th chord. Okay, follows the circle. Remember, always spell your chords around the circle of thirds. Put the information above. Okay, so the question will be, resolve this chord. Right? It's a dominant 7th chord. It's circle progression. It's going to go to its tonic. All right? So step 1, always, when we're showing voice leading frames like this, or doing 4-part harmony, okay, we have to think about what the notes of the chord are so that we don't leave anything out. Okay, so the circle of thirds helps us to do that. F, A, C. I was way off on my pitch. Okay, but so step 1, always when doing 4-part harmony, is write the bass. Okay, so here we have a tonic chord F. So I'm going to write that note first. Now, because the question on the test is resolve the chord, we have to think about, what are we resolving? What we're resolving is the 7th factor. And what direction does it go? Goes down by step. Okay, type 1 resolution. So I locate the 7th factor. I might even, circle it just to go, hey, wait a second, I got to deal with that thing. I put it down by step. Now, that accomplishes a few things. First of all, I have the root, I have the 7th factor taken care of. 50% of the problem is solved just because of the instructions. Next, when it comes to triads and root position, I always remember that I'm going to double the root. So I put that wherever the closest place is to go. And that looks like the place it's supposed to go, but it can't. Because there's a better solution. In this case, I'd probably double the root like this and then put the C here. And then what I do is I cross off these to make sure that I've got one from each. Okay, could the bass go down? Yeah, the bass could go down. So there's always going to be some options with voicing, but generally speaking, take care of the root first, the seventh second, and if you see in the middle of the texture the leap of a third, that's totally normal. Okay. But generally speaking, those are the steps for that kind of a problem. All right, how are we doing? Questions? I know I've got my back turned now. Okay. I got to remember how to use this studio. It's actually a pretty cool space. Okay. So those are the two music theory problems that will pass you out of theory two. Okay. Can you spell the triads? Can you resolve the dominant chords? And then can you continue a series of chords in a progression, voice leading them from one to the next? So let's talk about that problem next. Let me see what this is. Okay, Kylie Creek is going to join us here shortly. Okay, voice leading. There's two components to a voice leading problem that they could give you. The first one is complete the voice leading. The second one is analyze the voice leading. So we're going to look at one of each and then look at how that problem progresses from chapter to chapter, sort of, okay, into volume two, where chromatic harmony occurs. All right. Most of the time, these questions, when they write them, they try to make it manageable because they know that there's a time constraint. They don't want to sit there and be giving a test for 4.5 hours. They want to give a 45-minute test. And so usually it's going to be a short example featuring a logical progression. Okay, so where was I? Voice lead. Yeah. So we're going to set up a quick example here. From Benward. This is why I use this book, because it's so good. And we'll do one that has some secondary chords. And my no, not Maya. I my my yeah, my television studio eyes are not adjusted. So this is page 306. This is a really good example. It's comprehensive and will give us okay. So I just found out that the theater is doing a play in October called Sherwood. And Sean Bird, if you know the Birds, they're brilliant creators. Sean took a course in acting combat. And so he learned how to use swords and all kinds of weapons. In Colorado, he took this course. And so he's certified to teach this now. So they're going to do on-stage combat, which I think is just amazing. So that's coming to Normandale. Watch
Hey,
out.
Rob, is it supposed to be in chapter 14?
Uh, chapter 14.
Yeah, that's what 306 is for us.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm using a different edition. This is 14.4, number
Okay.
3.
Thank you.
Thank you. What would I do without you? Okay, so this is a very typical kind of problem that you might see, because once again here, testing voice leading. So now, when it comes to voice leading, it's pretty simple. When it comes to root position chords, we double the root. Root times 2. When it comes to first inversion, you can double anything you want to keep it simple. Okay, smooth. When it comes to second inversion chords, we double the bass, which is the 5th of the chord. All right. So let's review. We have the little numbers. Okay. If we have a 5 and a 3, what does that mean? Root position. Most of the time, you will never see a 5 and a 3. If there's no 5 and 3 and no numbers, it means root position. Because the little numbers, the figured bass, is kind of a need-to-know system. You need to know if it's first inversion. So 6, first. Okay? If you see a pair of 3s, it means 2/3 above the bass. Now then, when, remember 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 4, 2, these are the code. This is the code for a chord that has a 7th factor. Okay, so 7, root, 6, 5, first, 4, 3, second, 4, 2, third. Now, some colleges don't believe 4/2 is the actual thing. They'll just put a 2. Why they do that, I don't know. Most of the world calls it 4/2, but University of Minnesota just puts a 2. So Mark, watch out for that. All right, so when we take the lay of the land, before I even start the exercise, I'm going to look at this carefully. I see here that there's a 6 and a 5. So I know that there's some kind of 7th chord here. All right, I'm not going to worry about it just yet. I see first inversion, 7th, and then a pair of 3s, which means a double third above the bass, 6. So I'm just kind of collecting information before I begin. Now, the last chord is in root position because there's no 5 or 3, no number underneath. I'm going to start with the last chord because that's going to clue me in on some other information. So, circle of thirds. Circle of thirds. I love it when the board gets messy. Okay, so I'm starting over here, and it's super healthy when you're working to put the key signature on your circle, just to be clear. All right, so the first bass note's in E flat. So I'm going to take the circle, and because I want to get this right. Okay, The last chord's a tonic chord, which means that, okay, this confirms the key of E flat, which is good. And then we can kind of look backwards. The first chord is given, E flat, G, B flat. Okay, and then we'll just kind of hop through this. All right, so we have a 6, we take the bass note, back to the circle. Okay, when you have a 6, go back one, that's the root, E flat, G, B flat. And so we fill that in. Yeah. Now we're cooking with gas. Okay, we have a 6 and a 5. G. This means first inversion. Locate the G. Go back one. This chord is going to have 4 notes. G, E flat, G, B flat, D. Now, there's a flat next to the 5. All right? That means that this chord is going to have a chromatic pitch. The 5th above the bass, okay, this is where I think people sometimes forget. The 5th above the bass is going to be flatted. An easier way to understand that is this usually means the dominant 7th chord. When we look at the 5th above the bass, which is G, that's D, so we're going to put a flat on it. Now then, if you need to draw a piano keyboard, if you're sitting in a desk in a testing center, which is oftentimes the way this stuff works, you can always draw a piano keyboard by doing this. 2 black keys, 3 black keys. And then you can, if you want to, put the white keys in there, but sometimes they'll give you a piece of scratch paper. So I'm thinking E, G, I'll put another pair of these in here. E, G, E flat, G, B flat, D flat. Now, when we do this in class, I always play the chord, and then that really helps us, right? Because we can hear it. We go, oh, dominant 7. All right, but if you're sitting in a desk, you may have to do the interval calculations to make sure that it's correct. And that's why drawing a piano keyboard or something like it may help. Okay, so let's keep going. Next, we have an A flat. Okay, pair of 3s. So back to the circle of thirds. A flat, C, C, E flat. So there's going to be 2 C's somehow. Hopefully we make this work. Okay, then another 6. We've seen this before. First inversion. We find the bass note. We go back one, and then stack the triad. D, F, A flat. Okay, so now there's two ways to approach the next step. We either tackle the Romans or we tackle the voice leading. And in class we've done a little bit of both. Let's attack the Romans first. Our first chord has an E flat as its root, so okay, pretty safe to say that's a 1. Now the next chord, E flat, is still the root, but okay, this is where proctors really make, they really divide a group how they solve first inversion. Now, a lot of theory students in theory 2 make this mistake. They look at the bass note and try to figure that note diatonically. In E flat, if we think about the note G, I feel like I'm yelling. if we think about G, we would call that 3. That seems logical. And I see that all the time initially when we're just learning how to analyze Roman numerals in a key. Actually, you have to think about the root. The root is what tells you the Roman. So don't make that mistake. If you see a 6, that's almost like they're trying to trick you to figure out if you know how to understand what the root is. And then we put the 6 there. It's sort of redundant, but okay. Now, next, they're throwing at us a secondary dominant. Remember, the primary dominant is the dominant that belongs to the key. In this case, the dominant in the key of E flat is B flat. This is a dominant 7th chord in the way that it's spelled, but it's not the actual dominant of the key of E flat. Okay? So next step. In what key is E flat the dominant? We got to solve that problem. The answer is found on the circle of fourths. All right, which is another circle. If you're given a piece of scratch paper, it's helpful to write out a circle of fourths. All right, so we've come up with an E flat chord, E flat 7. So I go clockwise to figure out what it belongs to. Then I have to circle back to E flat to figure out what the symbol's going to be. So I'm going to start with this. It's a dominant 7 chord, okay? Dominant 7. But I have to circle back to E flat to figure out what it's dominant 7 of. When I go to the circle of fourths, I see that's dominant 7 of A, in this case A flat. Now I go to the diatonic theory and I go, okay, A flat's 4, and I can solve that problem. But this is where they're going to get tricky. They're going to want to see that this is 5, 6, 5. Okay, it's first inversion of 4. And then we look at the next chord. Usually a secondary dominant chord will fulfill its prophecy and pass its way on to the chord of resolution. In this case, that's what's going to happen. Finally, we come to the end here. D, F, A flat, diatonic. Again, F is the lowest note, but we have to think about the root. Always think root. The root's D, diminished, 6, and 1. In some ways, the Romans are the hard part, because if we wind up with a secondary situation or first inversion chords, we're going to be challenged to figure out exactly what Roman belongs there. So, filling in the voice leading. Well, first inversion is very kind. This is where we want to make sure that we cross things off. So we have a B flat, we have a G. We need to make sure that we have all hands on deck. Okay, so I know it looks a little weird, but we have some jumpies. Yeah, so a couple things about voice leading, right? Review. First, no parallel fifths, no parallel octaves, no parallel unisons. So parallel perfects are off the table. That's also true for counterpoint. So parallel perfects off the table. Next, voice crossing. Okay, voice crossing is bad. That's where the bass crosses over the tenor. Okay, that's something that people get tangled up on. Sometimes, voice crossing. The third problem that they test is too much space. So between the voices, you can't have more than an octave. So if you see more than an octave between your voices, all you have to do to fix that is flip voices around, and it usually fixes the problem. Okay, we talked about that principle of invertible counterpoint. That if your counterpoint is good, okay, if your counterpoint is good, you can put the inner voices anywhere you want, and it generally works itself out. Okay, now we have the dominant seventh chord of A flat. So we're just going to keep crossing off notes. We have the G, we have the B flat. Keep the common tone if you can, but you can't always keep the common tone, and it's okay if you don't. But so we have a G, we have a B flat. We want to figure out where D flat has to go, and I think we can keep the common tone in this case. Put the D flat here. All right. Now this is cool. This is super cool because I think we figured out the solution to our little extra third problem. When it comes to resolving, just like I said 10 minutes ago, resolve the seventh factor first. Type 1 resolution. We're resolving the seventh first. The seventh is D flat, and D flat needs to go down by step. When D flat goes down by step, it goes to C. Now we understand why there are 2 3s here. We have a C here, we have a C here. It's because the melodic design, I'm not going to talk about why this is the way that it is, but because the C is in the soprano and because the D flat has to resolve down by step, that's why we wind up with 2 C's. But the cool thing is we get to keep the common tone. Sorry, altos, but that's just the way things go now. All right, so we have 2 C's. We're going to check them off. Okay, now we have a D and an F. Read Appendix A of Volume 1. Just rescan that. Appendix A, Volume 1. Because that has all the voice leading rules. And what you'll notice is that when you have a 7 diminished chord, usually you're going to double the bass note. Okay? The bass note in first inversion. What you can't do is double the leading tone, which is dangerous. That's why this chord is rarely found in root position. Because, well, you'd wind up doubling the leading tone, or at least being tempted to do that. So we're wondering, where can we double this? And I don't know. We have the D in the soprano. That's the leading tone. It's going up to the tonic. We need to throw an A flat in there. So let's throw an A flat in there. And then double the bass. Now, we're coming to the end. And some of you are wondering, is this voice crossing? No. It's basically what it is. You can think about it like when C goes to A flat, it's like C just took the place of the previous note. It didn't cross over it. Okay, it didn't cross over it. So we are good to go. And then I think the writing on the wall is this. Do not fear your voice leading. It will get tested. The trouble is that they're probably going to test a secondary dominant, or a secondary leading tone chord, or some sort of secondary. So if you've come up with an accidental in your chord, that's the flag that needs to go off. You go, oh wait, this has got to be what Gronemann was talking about. It's one of these secondary situations. So then you have to do the forensic work. Trace the chord back to where you would expect to find it, and then try to understand it in the key that you're working with. Don't fear it. Just if you come up with an accidental, just, put that pack on and say, okay, I'm going to climb this mountain and see if I can figure this out. And it'll probably be okay. Your voice leading will probably be epic. As long as you don't have parallel fifths, parallel octaves, parallel unisons, and double the leading tone, anything else is probably going to be okay. All right, that is a lot of me. What about you? Questions? Fears? Sean Bird came back from sabbatical, and he talked a little bit about his experiences with combat, stage combat, that kind of stuff. And then he said, but what he did on sabbatical, the sabbatical is basically when you take a year off and you do a project, go find yourself, scuba dive in Thailand. That's what I did. But you try to do a little bit of work. You wind up doing a lot of work, and you wind up doing trying to find yourself. He said that he tried to put himself in an uncomfortable position every day. And for an artist, it's pretty easy to find those places. So my message here is that if we're still feeling a little uncomfortable with this, just try to lower the bar, remain calm, circle of thirds, circle of fourths. You've been trained to do these things. And if you come up with an anomaly, it's going to fit into one of those other categories: secondary, dominant, or, as we're going to go into next, chromatic harmony. How am I doing on pacing here? I want to talk next about form. This is another test that I see given frequently. Sometimes, in some schools, the theory placement test will be start here. I gotta wash my hat. Some placement tests will give you a melody. And say, okay, chart the form. There are two primary forms that you're going to see: binary form and ternary form. Binary form. How many parts to binary form? 2. Ternary form has 3. Okay. So this is, I gotta get something that's not fleece. I'll be right back. These cats are all union cats. I mean, they think they can do anything they want. They got protection. Yeah. I don't know about Mark's cat, but my cat belongs to local 1420. They meet at the Elks Club on the third Tuesday of every month. Okay, binary form. Be prepared to do this. It's fairly intuitive, I think. Binary means two. Two. Okay? So, when charting a binary form, we're going to start with A and B. And then, with binary form, if you're asked to chart a binary form, put repeat signs. Because usually binary forms will have phrase A will repeat, and then phrase B will repeat. Now, if given an example, we'll get an example here. This is towards the end of your book, volume 1. Take a look at 16.1, and maybe somebody can figure out what page that's actually. 16.1. Wow. Okay. Usually it'll be 344. It's a
I have it as 353 for 16.1.
okay, cool. It's Handel Air from Suite in E major. Now, unfortunately for placement tests, they're not going to play the music for you. You kind of have to look at it and hear it, in an ear training and theoretical way. When we look at 16.1, we can see this binary form. You see two sections with the repeat signs. All right, so step one, I'm going to lay out the chart A and B. And then what we want to do is mark in where we think the phrases are. Now, all we have to do is look for the first repeat sign, and we know where that first section ends. And to me, this looks like one phrase. And so I'm going to mark in that this starts in measure 1, and then 1, 2, 3 ends in measure 3. Now, the next step, you want to mark in what the cadences are. So we're going to look at the third measure, and when we look at the third measure, we notice that, oh, there's a B major chord there. Now we're in the key of E, and so we mark in that the cadence here is on 5. We don't have to know where it starts, we just have to know where it ends. Okay, so we have the section, and then we have this phrase. Now you can go a step further and indicate that this is little a. Right? Remember that big A refers to the form, little a refers to a phrase. Now, going past the double bar, we notice that the music is different. And let me put this on the projector so we can see it. Man, I am blind. These lights are just intense. Okay, so clearly this is a stopping point. And so as we proceed, we're looking for the next stopping point. And I'm thinking it's probably here. I'm thinking it's probably here because there's a quarter note. And after that, we have something that looks somewhat different. Texture is critical in doing in-desk analysis. So I'm going to make a guess that the next phrase ends at measure 5. So we'll go back to the board and chart that. So phrase B also begins in measure 3 and goes to measure 5 and ends on a B major chord. And then the last phrase, C, ends in measure 7. And that ends on a tonic. Most of the time, you're always going to end on a tonic. Okay, so we have this form charted. Now, binary form has 2 parts, A and B, and then what happens within that form can be very creative. In this case, we see a single A phrase making up the A section, but in the B section, we see 2 phrases. Now, periods. Remember that really cool exercise where we had like 12 different melodies and you had to tell whether or not it made a period? The definition of period, as you see in the textbook, is that you'll have 2 phrases. The first phrase has a weaker cadence than the second phrase. So if we have a period, the first phrase will end on a dominant usually. The second phrase will end on a tonic. So in the B section here, we have a period. The 2 types of periods that we experience on these tests are parallel periods and contrasting periods. Parallel periods, the 2 phrases bear some similarity. Contrasting periods, the 2 phrases are different, but are held together by the criteria of a weak cadence and a strong cadence. So in this case, Handel writes a period for his B section, but it's a, what are you doing? Okay. Yeah, I know. You want attention. Okay. The B section consists of a contrasting period. It's a period because the cadences bear the expected resemblance. Weak, strong, but contrasting because the 2 phrases don't bear actual resemblance. The example that we always use in music theory weak, strong, okay, parallel period. Okay. Ternary form. Ternary form will have 3 parts. Um, yeah, it's 16.1 was the example. So you can kind of look for chapter 16.
I'm not finding it anywhere.
Is anybody else finding it?
Bach and Taco Bell and Haydn and everything else, but no handle.
No handle. Okay. Well, I'll take a picture and send it out.
What's thank you.
Okay. Got to move on though, because we've got
Yeah.
quite a few more things to do.
Yes.
I'm going to go back to the handout here. So we're going to share up this screen. I want to talk about strategies for dealing with theory 3. Okay. You can see here part 3 on the screen. I don't want to spend too much time on this because sometimes it is not attacked in a diagnostic exam, except for in Madison they test this stuff. I know that. University of Minnesota expects that if you pass your diagnostic exam, you're going to go to form and analysis as a performer. And as an education major, you probably won't have to take those courses. But just know that this is the information that you'll be probably responsible for. Renaissance is very rarely tested. But these bullet points here are the things that you want to kind of be aware of. When they ask you to do a Renaissance analysis, what they're really looking for is, can you figure out what the mode is? Because it's modal music. Can you analyze vertical intervals? And then can you find the cadences? Those are the most important things. If you put a Roman numeral on the score, that is a strike against you. Because Roman numerals hadn't been invented yet. So don't put Roman numerals on a Renaissance polyphony score. Okay, two-part analysis. These are the two-part inventions. The only thing you really need to know here off my sheet is motive and countermotive. Those are the most important two things. Can you identify the motive, which is the unaccompanied first bit that you hear, and then the countermotive is the other material that's put against the motive. All right, so go back and just look at that chapter. On the first page, it makes a whole bunch of sense. This is two-part invention. I have seen placement exams that ask you the 15 key signatures for Bach's two-part inventions. And they're listed here. C major, C minor, D major, D minor, E flat, E major, E minor, F major, F minor, G major, G minor, A major, A minor, B flat, and B minor. What they're not going to ask you probably is why are they in those keys? Because that would require an essay, and they don't want to grade that stuff, quite honestly. When it comes to fugue, if you're asked to analyze a fugue, most important, be able to analyze and find the subject, which is the first thing you hear, and then the counter subject. Excuse me, guys. So this goes over where the what to look for in a fugue. This might be more useful if you do have to take form and analysis where you're going to study fugues again. This is why I include them in my course, to make sure that we're ready when we go on, that it's not unfamiliar. Plus, we study them in music history. Okay. Now, it's not uncommon to have to chart a sonata form. A sonata form is a binary form. And sonata forms, if you keep it simple, they're really not that hard to chart. It's just kind of memorization, you know. And what I had you guys do is chart sonata forms on the board. I think I had you guys do it 3 times just for reinforcement. So again, we're testing theory. We're testing into theory 4 now. If we want to pass out of theory 4, we got to know some forms. Usually it's the sonata form they're going to bake you on. And so it's a binary form. Just remember that, because you already did binary form. So if we want to just blow binary form up, then we get sonata form. So again, I'm going to start with A and B. But then what they're going to expect you to do is understand the language. Exposition, development, recapitulation. So once again, I'm going to mark in those repeat signs because that keeps me organized. Okay? Keeps me organized. It gives me like a frame to fill in. Okay, now we've got the big picture laid out. Next, we got to fill in the details. So for the exposition, we're going to have theme 1, or I like to think thing 1 and thing 2. Thing 1, and then theme 2. And then we have coda, or codetta. And then to get from theme 1 to theme 2, we gotta have a transition. Now, to show that you have super strength, you're going to put some Roman numerals down to represent keys. Theory teachers love this. When students understand that Roman numerals can represent a chord in a diatonic sense, but also can represent a bigger picture, a key. So exposition is going to be in the tonic key. The second theme in the exposition is going to be in the dominant key. All right? Then we cross over to the development section. And for the development section, I always put a question mark because we don't know what the plan is. This is the exciting part. All right? So this is 15 minutes into NCIS. Pick a city. Development section. Now, got to get back home to tonic. So we're going to have this retransition, which takes us to 5. And then we repeat the exposition. Theme 1, theme 2, all in the tonic key. And then a coda. And that's sonata form. I highly doubt, and I've never heard of this, being given a 300 measure composition in a diagnostic exam and being asked to analyze that forensically. I mean, literally breaking it down by phrase. That takes class periods to do just one. Okay, doing a problem like that in a few minutes is not doable. Generally speaking, this is what we see: is does the candidate understand what the layout of sonata form, which is the ultimate binary form for symphonies and major classical compositions. This is the height of classicism. So if they do ask you about sonata form, it'll probably be chart the form. So just practice this once or twice, and you'll be ready for that. I'm not going to go too much further into the handout when it comes to 20th century stuff, because I've never seen that 20th century techniques being asked of on a diagnostic exam, because again, that's another course called 20th century analysis. But look at the handout as you get deep into towards the end, and just try to remember some of those operations that we did that were mathematical, kind of fun. But I just know that it may appear, but I don't know. Oftentimes it depends on the theory department's chair. If the theory department's chair is like heavy into 20th century stuff, it may show up on that test. But most of the time, nobody's trying to trick anyone. We just want to make sure that you can spell your chords. So let's just get into the last section, which is the chromatic harmony. Okay, so we're going to make a list of chromatic harmony areas, starting with borrowed chords. Okay, these are chords that are borrowed from a minor key and applied to a major key. And there was that really cool exercise where we reverted an entire major key composition to a minor key by adding these two notes. Okay, these two notes, flat 3, flat 6. That's where if you come up with a flat 3 or a flat 6, you're probably dealing with a borrowed situation. Borrowed chords. Next, N6. Remember, N6 is all about flat 2. Okay, so if we take an example of that, key is G major. Okay, I'm asked to spell the N6 chord. Now, 6 means first inversion. Let us not forget that 6 means first inversion. But before we deal with 6, let's spell the chord as a triad. Now, it's a major chord, right? Circle of thirds. We start with 2 in the key of G. Okay, that's B. Now, I'm going to flat the 2. Problem is, F is sharp in my key, but this has to be a major triad, so I have to take that sharp away to make sure that it's a major triad. Again, that goes back to the piano keyboard. Major triad. 1, 2, 3, 4 half steps. 1, 2, 3 half steps. And if you find yourself in a major key, it's going to have 2 accidentals. Now I'm going to write the chord down. I'm starting with D, the third of the chord, and then we write the notes like that. Okay, so flat 2 major triad in first inversion. A6. Okay, these are those regional chords. We say Italian, right? German, and French. C. Okay, Italian, German, and French. Now, these chords will be tested. And so, and they could be tested in 2 ways. either in construction or analysis. So the question is, how do you know if you have an augmented sixth chord? Well, I'm going to be quite frank. There's going to be an augmented sixth. I think that probably makes sense. Most of the time these chords are found in a minor key. It would be pretty impressive to see an example on a test in a major key. Okay, first things first. Construction. They're going to ask you, okay, can you spell an Italian sixth chord? Step one. You're going to start with scale tone 6. Okay, try to remember the 6 means augmented 6, but it also is kind of a clue that you can say, okay, I got to find the 6th scale tone first. Okay, we're in the key of G minor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a D, or an E flat, sorry. Okay, now Italian's going to have 3 notes. Okay, E flat. Now, when it comes to augmented 6th chords, you have to figure out what the augmented 6th is. Now that's going to be an augmented 6th above the bass note. So if we think about a 6th above E flat, that's C. Okay, that's C. We're just going to put it up here. Okay, now an augmented 6th is going to be the interval of a 6th, but 1 step higher than a major 6th. So it's going to sound like a 7th. In this case, C sharp. The augmented 6th will always have an accidental that's raising it. It could be a natural, or it could be a sharp, or it could be a double sharp. So just know that it's got to look like a 7th on your keyboard. It's got to sound like a 7th when you play it. But at the end of the day, it's got to be an augmented 6th. Now for Italian, there's only 3 notes, and so we can add them. Italian's double the tonic pitch. Oh, that's another point that we made in class, that the augmented 6th chord always includes the tonic. Okay, so the German chord, again, we can start with the same model, but the German chord will have, it'll look like a triad, E flat, G, B flat. So I can put those notes like that. Okay, that's going to sound like dominant. It can also act like dominant. And then Frenchy chord. I'm going to show this another way here in a second. Okay, we can put the B flat here. My train of thought just like launched out the door here. I'm going to put the C sharp up here again. When it comes to French chords, what you're looking for is a shape. You're going to have this shape. Okay, so there's going to be this second in here. So again, we can keep this and then put this here. So let me be a little more clear, because that wasn't very clear. So for Italian, we'll put them in this order this time: French, German. Okay, Italian chord is going to have this shape. French going to have this shape, and German is going to have this shape. All right, so you can see that all of these chords have one thing in common. They have the tonic pitch. They all have a sixth, but then French has this, and then German has basically a triad. That's the easiest way to, I think, see these. Sometimes on diagnostic exams, they don't do it in 4-part harmony. Rather, they just show a simple construction. So, for example, the key is C major, treble clef. So, again, the 6th scale tone flat. And they'll ask, which one is this? Well, you know it's Italian because why? 3 notes. So I can fill that in. I always put a 6. Okay, then we see this shape here. Okay? And to me, that just looks like it's going to sound strange. It's got 2 tritones in it. That's Frenchy. And then German looks like a triad, but then has that augmented 6. So again, just looking at the shapes, that can help. Let's see. The other chords that they may test you on are the chromatic medians, and then finally the altered dominants. Oh, one more, extensions of dominance. When I took my graduate theory test at the U, none of this other stuff was on that test. It went as far as augmented 6 chords, and that was the end of the chromatic harmony. And it was all identification, a lot of identification, but yeah, we didn't see any extended chords on the U of M test. And in fact, the NASM evaluators, when they came and they observed our class, they were extremely impressed with how advanced you guys were in that class. So I feel pretty confident that the material is there. Okay, so now, with our last few minutes, what do you guys want to see? Let's just think about that question, because we're talking about 4 semesters of theory. We could chat that in, or just... God, my camera's not working. Oh, gee wilgers. I wonder why. How about this? In terms of going forward...
I had to just post a question.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Counterpoint. Maya. That's a good question. Let me see if I can't I don't understand why. How much should we be thinking about counterpoint? Okay, so at some institutions, counterpoint is taught first before anything else, and so it's a semester 1 thing. It's fairly rare. When it comes to counterpoint, there's a sheet that I passed out that put the basics of counterpoint all onto one page. You should review that, because if it is, in fact, a species counterpoint test, and that's on it, then if that doesn't go well, then they don't let you go forward until that's solved, which is, in my opinion, sort of crazy. But when it comes to counterpoint, just remember a few simple things. Such a good question. First of all, you're going to be given a cantus firmus. Okay? It's going to be a melody. Usually they'll bow treble clefs. And then you'll be given something like this. Melody. And the question's going to be, okay, write first species against this. This is pretty, I want to say, navigable. Okay, so we're going to try to navigate it. Step 1, we're going to end the counterpoint. Now remember that it always ends on an octave in contrary motion to the bass. When you begin the counterpoint, you have 3 choices. You can begin with a unison, you can begin with a fifth, or begin with an octave. Let's suppose we start with an octave. That's almost always the safest bet. Now, as you proceed through this exercise, the only thing you have to remember is that you can't have parallel fifths, parallel octaves, parallel unisons. I think we've got that cleared up, right? But then there are some of those tricky little rules. When it comes to imperfect consonances, that means, what's imperfect consonants? Oh, that's a third and a sixth. Perfect consonances are unisons, fifths, and octaves. When you proceed your counterpoint, imperfect consonances are always safe, okay? So we try to stick to as many imperfects as possible. Once we get into perfect, that's when it gets to be problematic. So I'm going to do this, and what you do, if you have to suffer through this, write down the numbers, okay, and where you have perfect, circle them, so that you're thinking, hey, I got to deal with this. All right, now we're on a sixth. As we proceed, we have to think about what's possible. Now, you can't write fourths because they're dissonant. You can't write sevenths. You can't write seconds. So rule out the dissonances and try to stick to as many thirds and sixths as possible. So what I'm going to do is mark down what is possible. Okay? So you could also mark down what's not possible. That's another way to do it. So we're thinking about, I'm going to write it here so it's easier to see. Okay? So a third, a sixth, an octave above the cantus, Now, when you're proceeding through a counterpoint, the only real problem is going to a perfect consonance in parallel motion. You can't do that. So we can start to rule up, we can take off the table. Okay? Imperfect to perfect, you can't do that. So I'm only left with two choices. Now, let's just, for the purpose of eating government cheese, we'll just do this. Okay, now I have a D. And so once again, I'm going to mark what's possible. A third, a sixth, okay, an octave. Anything greater than that is a problem because you can't leap. You know, you can't have these big leaps. Oh, we could also have a fifth. Now, when it comes to going to a perfect consonance from an imperfect consonance, if they go opposite directions, that's totally okay. Let's try it. I'm feeling salty. Okay, so now we have a 3, now we have a 5. Can you keep the common tone? Well, yeah, but you can't just keep the common tone forever. So I'm going to have a unison. Now, remember that in order to tell the story proper, we got to get to the end and link where we are here, and we've got 3 more notes. Okay, so I'm going to try a parallel third, and then you know, once again, we're marking in what the options are. Remember, the only options that you have are 3, 5, 6, and 8. Okay? Anything else is a problem. Let's look at 8. 8 would be here. But that's the leap of a tritone, which you can't have tritones in counterpoint. So we have to choose. So imperfect to perfect. Let's try it. Imperfect to perfect, you can only go opposite directions. When it comes to perfects, you can't go into them in parallel. All right? So that's the big no-no. Now, what's kind of cool here, if I mark in the options, once again, I notice that, you know, C is an option. And I might get a red mark on my paper for having, you know, 2 instances of common tones. But this solves the problem without any errors, as they would call them in counterpoint, which actually does have these rules, if you will. Second species is just adding another note between each of these. And so we can add another note for it. It actually is pretty manageable as long as the downbeats in your first species counterpoint downbeats have to be consistent in second species. So let me say that again. The first species applies to second species. What happens in between? You can have passing tones, you can have leaps. It's very flexible. Second species is actually a little easier to write than first species. I highly doubt they'll ask you to write a fourth species, which has 4 notes against 1, 4 to 1, because of time constraints and the amount of time it takes to grade that kind of a test. Maya, does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Do you have that? Do you guys have that sheet that I handed out? Where the heck is my... Should I? I can't. I can't. I don't know where it is right now. It's on D2L, so it'd be a little tricky for me to. Oh gosh, I'm upside down. Huh. Now the world is right. Annie has left the building. Well, I hope this was useful. Mark, when's your test? It's Tuesday, right?
Yeah, Tuesday. I think it's around 8 in the morning. I'd have to double check though.
Oh, that's a great time to have a test.
Oh yeah.
8 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. Usually a colonoscopy is given at 8 o'clock in the morning.
I'd rather take the test.
Well, uh, yeah, the prep work I think for a colonoscopy is in some ways a lot harder than than, than the theory diagnostic. Just once again, just trust in in your training, and take your time when you. It's the harmony stuff is where they really put the stress. Um, in most institutions. Again, this we talk about these things at the NASM conference every year. How are we intaking transfer students? How are we diagnosing placement and so forth? And so I've heard about every type of way of doing this. But Maya's question about counterpoint's a good one. Excellent question, because that if they do drill that deep into theoretical training, then they're going to ask for it. But in some cases, counterpoint isn't even taught in the theory sequence, because it is a topic that has a whole course called counterpoint, and it's a 2-semester sequence, and usually only graduate students will take counterpoint as a class, or brilliant undergraduate students that pass all the diagnostics with flying colors, and they will sometimes be invited to take counterpoint and composition and stuff like that. I've had several students go to the U and wind up passing all their tests and be invited to take Schenkerian theory or counterpoint or whatever. So, Mark, if you pass your tests and they say, oh, you should take Schenkerian theory, run. Transfer to Augsburg. No, if you do get to take Schenkerian theory, or any of those other courses, do it, man, because you'll probably be studying with David Damschroeder, who is just absolutely brilliant, quirky, but brilliant. You might be eating pancakes on Fridays.
Interesting.
If you eat pancakes on Fridays, you've made it big time. So you have the outline, of the class, of the topics, and it says in the outline, first, don't fear this process. It is what it is. And I know Katie took a preliminary test and said it was pretty easy. Any further questions? Oh wow, I'm over 10 minutes than I planned. Think of that.
Okay, I allowed for it.
Okay, feedback. For me, anything open season?
This is helpful for sure, just because
Yeah,
I haven't really thought that hard about a lot of this besides just casually. So sitting in a lesson again is, kind of tending to the fire.
I agree.
Having
I-
the opportunity to step back from it makes me realize how much we really learned.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
how much you really taught us, which may not be the same thing.
I will remember that. Um, yeah, the outline, I think the outline is pretty good. And the purpose of the outline, even though it's so much information, it seems, hopefully will just kind of jar some of those thoughts that, oh, we did do that. And, oh, I remember that. And it may seem a little rough around the edges, but take at least, if you're faced with these tests, take at least a day to kind of just open up your book and go through the outline and I think that um, I I think about it like drain flies. Okay, you get fruit flies, in your kitchen, and it's like, you know, do I have to clean the stove? Do I have to, to get rid of these flies? Do I have to? Maybe I do because I spilled barbecue sauce on there, and the flies are getting into that. Um, but generally speaking, you're trying to figure out the source of the problem, and usually it's a trap that's dried out. So you pour bleach in there. Anyway, so you're trying to figure out where the holes are. That's my point. And so that's the point of the outline. You could highlight, hey, wait a second, I don't really remember that, and then go back to the index or to the table of contents, the TOC, find that information, and then use the book to do some review. I'm here all weekend. You have my email. I'm happy to do Zoom if you're studying and if there's a question about a particular topic. Usually we can figure it out pretty quick. And I have my home studio here. Okay. Well, Kylie, B, do you know if you have to take a diagnostic test?
I don't. The co-head of the music director had a meeting with me and she was like, "Oh yeah, you know what you're talking about." So she just cleared me for everything.
So you went through security, you're clear to get on the plane.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good for you.
Katie didn't get the outline. Maya's posting it a second time. Thank you. Well, I printed copies of all of the syllabi, and I'm going to try to figure out where a good place to put that is, because I intended print copies, and then to get them to you guys so you have a complete dossier of the theory course. Now, when it comes to ear training, that's a whole nother thing. Every school is going to be a little different in how they approach that, depending on who's teaching the class and who's writing the test. They may have you sing, they may have you clap, they may have you do dictation. Usually it's going to be melodic dictation and harmonic dictation or rhythmic dictation. So for that stuff, go back and look at what ear training 4 was like. Remember, I threw almost every possible weird problem at you guys, and we did pretty well. Know that they're probably not gonna really go crazy. If Dam Schroeder's given that test, Mark, I took a Dam Schroeder ear training test, and I pretty much nailed the harmonic progression, and this was years ago. But he played it 16 times.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And so by the 5th, because I had been through, ear training you know, but by the time you figure out the soprano and the bass, you can pretty much figure out what the other notes are. You guys did that in your training class where we isolated what, if we got the soprano, we got the bass, we can figure out a 4-part harmony, which is the standard for most written stuff. Whether it's pop music or it's, you know, what have you. Usually there's 4 voices involved. Well, I gotta go because I'm over and I'm going to be late to my next thing. And I really don't care because this is so much more fun than talking about budget.
Thank you for doing this and for including me.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah,
I'm-
no problem. Hey, and you guys got my number, so if you need help with anything along the way, you know, if you have to take a analysis class and you want me to read your paper, you know, and that kind of thing, after you've put it through AI. I'm just kidding. Don't put it through AI. But you know, I'm always here to help you guys. You know, for all the, I get questions as people come back. They're going to grad school. They're like, wait a second. You know, there's that one thing that you said. There's that trick or this thing. You know, it's like, you know, could you help me with this or at least talk me off the ledge? You know, on this particular problem, or, you know, what will I face if I decide to throw myself at this or that? Yeah, I'm always here. Okay.
Thank you.
Good luck on the tests. Thank you.
Okay, we'll talk to you guys hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah. I wish
Bye,
we could
bye.
have a class reunion in a year or two.
Oh yeah, we'll do that.
It's been a fun class.
Yeah. Okay, we'll see you guys around.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.